And welcome back to ScavTalk, everyone. Today's episode, we've been discussing the recently released latest episode of the Chronicles of Vision. What's going on in there? Followed by, we got a bit of a mini game, one of the Ars Terminal, the virtual reality games, augmented reality, whatever you want to call it. And we got some interesting stuff from that, followed by a labs event. And then finally, we're going to close out with more Recoil discussion, everyone's favorite topic. So yeah, Giga, how's it going?
It's going well. It's going well. I felt very busy this week randomly. I've got loads of things that I've been putting off and putting onto the back burner that I've actually started churning through. But then it's like, trying to like do all those things and all the normal things at once. Even though it's the end of the wipe, usually it kind of like chills out a little bit. But I feel like I went through a bit of a sort of the wipe's not coming. I'm in a bit of a rut. What are we going to do for the next like month or two? Into like doing the hardcore thing and analyzing some of the stuff on Tarkov TV. And I don't know, I've sort of like felt myself like lift back up again a bit and be like, I don't know. It's like, it's one of those complicated things. Towards the end of the wipe, there's like just less stuff to talk about in general, just because there's, people are not playing or whatever. It's like hard to make things like super interesting or to even just be thinking up as interesting topics. At the beginning of the wipe, it's very, very easy because it basically just makes itself right. And at the end, you have to be a bit more creative. But yeah, I'm pleased with that. But it means that I'm kind of like infused into like making these things. Like the Recoil video that I did, and we'll talk about this later, but the Recoil video that I did, I ended up putting it out later than I would normally do.
Oh, really?
I missed my usual deadline. No one really notices on YouTube, to be honest. But, I normally put them out like 4 o'clock my time. And I was just like, I got to like 4 o'clock. Like usually I put them out the day before, actually, because it goes out to like my patrons a day early. And I got to like 4 o'clock on Wednesday. And I was just like, man, it's not finished. Like I'm actually just not done. And because it was one of those ones where it's like, obviously I want to show people some stuff, but it's also kind of for BSG. I was like, this needs to be done the way I want it to be done, And I've spoken to some of the community managers before, and like they do watch these videos. Things like there's like one of the other ones that I did previously that was they got referenced at some point, and I was just like, okay, like they do watch this stuff, so like I want to make sure that I actually get across the points that I really want to make and make it clear and obvious and hammer home that stuff. So yeah, so it's like all of those kind of things. I feel like I've sort of held myself to a higher standard than just like, oh, it's end of wipe, wipes in 2 weeks, or just like make this video and then move on to the next thing. So between all of that stuff, I had a guy coming over to have a look at putting solar panels on my house. I'm going to be upgrading my real hideout, the actual hideout, because electricity's very expensive, especially if you're on your PC all day.
Trying to get that Bitcoin 3 farm going.
Exactly. So I had him. That's why I ended up cutting my stream a little short on Thursday, because I had some guy over. I was talking to him about that, which is kind of cool. I'm excited about that as well. So there's like a lot of stuff going on. I've been pretty busy actually, outside of EFT, which is fun. It's good. It's good to be busy, definitely.
Yeah, I feel that like this week Friday is just like, I can't believe it's Friday already. I don't know where anything went. I mean, I'm so jealous of your ability just to like you say you're behind and put the video up. I was like, oh, Giga's already got the video out. I was like, okay, well, shit. I was kind of expecting it to be like maybe next week or something. But yeah. I'm still here sitting like, still like pondering some things. I haven't even started on the script.
I think like when you're in the swing of it, I think that the process does get easier. Honestly, like as you just get used to just like making stuff in a certain time, especially also it's like there's also that adage which I've heard it from a few people, which is, if you want something done, give it to somebody who's busy, or like work fills all available time.
Yeah.
When someone's like already busy, they're just like, crap, I've got to like fit this in somehow, and they just like go, right, what's like the minimum path that I can get to the thing that I want. And like I do feel like that often between like this and the kids and the other stuff that I got to do, and I'm just like like this morning I was trying to do some stuff about armor or whatever. And I was like, oh, I'm doing this thing this afternoon, like later on with the kids, that like I didn't want to pass up because like I'm just like, look, it's late wipe. I should be able to like go and do some stuff. That was kind of like that was the flexibility that I wanted coming doing this job in the first place. Then I was like, right, but that means I need to move ScavTalk like back an hour. And then I was like, but then I've got this other thing, so I've like pushed something to Monday, so I had to cram this thing into like this morning to make it. And I'm like, yeah, I can make it in this slot. That's fine. But I'm just like, write out this, try and do this, and just got like very streamlined about it. I think it's just the only way. And you get better with practice, but you have to like, a bit like Tarkov, you have to deliberately practice trying to make this stuff in that way and like not be distracted. Like it's so easy to procrastinate and something else takes your attention away and things. And that happens to me too. But it's Yeah, it's good when you've got the fear, as I like to call it, because that really gives you the proper kind of like, right, we got to buckle down now, you know?
The best motivator, fear.
Indeed. So,
Which, by the way, unrelated, congrats on 100K views on that hardcore video.
oh,
You were talking
thank
earlier
you.
about late wipe content creation and stuff. So
Mm.
I love to see it. I saw your
Yeah, it's
post.
funny. I've been trying kind of like each time the wipe comes to the end, because obviously like when the wipe happens, then I like go back to what I know, because that's the thing that I usually do, and it's just
Right.
like it's just my thing, right? I make
The
that
bread and
stuff. That's the
butter.
stuff that comes easiest to me. But I'm interested in making other stuff too. I want to
Mhm.
expand out as a creator, and I've tried like the last couple of wipes to do some of the things like this, and I've had some success and learned a few things over the way. But I think this time I was looking up a lot of different stuff and thinking about things and watching other people do it as well, because there's been a lot more of that, right? Like I didn't really think that until it was really Swamp Fox actually, until he started making like big hour-long movies
Yeah.
that were getting huge traction.
Yeah.
I didn't really think it was possible. Like we talked about this previously, just like, it's not really doable in Tarkov compared to Rust or something. And he really first showed that it was possible, and there is an audience for it if you do it in the right way. And like, I just don't think, I'm not the person to be like the trailblazer in that particular genre. Right? It's not really my thing. But I want to learn and I want to understand how to do this kind of stuff, because it's cool and interesting. And Ramen Style, he did the same thing, right? He had a shorter one. He was one of the only ones that I've seen that was short, because this was under 20 minutes, I think. And it's like nearing 2 million views now, which is insane. And I was just like, man, this is so cool. Like I've always wanted to make this kind of content, but it never really justified the time, because it's like I just don't really think anybody's going to watch it. So it's like, well, okay, well, how do we make it like super interesting in the way that those guys do? So the last couple of wipes has been okay. I had like a Lighthouse one 2 wipes ago, I think, and then there was the one about the scarcity one, which did pretty well. But this time it was like learning all the lessons from that and seeing other people do it and just going, okay, actually, this is a better way to do this. This is a better way to build a story. This is a better way to get people more engaged and make it just more interesting for people. I kind of put that together with the hardcore thing, which is an interesting topic on its own, and then it ends up doing really well. So I'm super pleased. Honestly, I'm really pleased, because it's just nice when this stuff does good, and it's especially with that type of content, because it's not throwaway clickbaity whatever, right? Like some stuff just goes viral because it's just like dumb and stupid, and that's just the way YouTube is. But these types of things don't get to decent numbers of views unless they are actually good, right? It's like Jesse's one. I don't know if you've seen Jesse's like One Life that he did with Velian.
A little bit. I didn't watch the whole thing. Yeah.
That's like so well edited. I actually spoke to Jesse a little bit about that. He was just like, yeah, it took literally like months to edit and stuff. It's just like crazy. And you can see, because I mean, he's got an editor, proper editor working on it. He's not just doing it himself. But it's just like all the overlays to like set the scene and all this kind of stuff. Like it takes a long time, actually. It's the thing that I learned about doing these, is that you really need to come from the perspective of, like anything, the structure and the drawing board first, and like how do you want it to go, and then you get down into the raids. Like I think previously I was just too keen to just like get into the editing. I'm just like, oh, these are the cool raids, and we'll just like splice them together. But there's like nothing really joining them together, or it's not really that. There's nothing driving forwards like the story or anything. So it's just it's fun to see that type of content really start to kick off in our world, and to be a little tiny part of it, is nice. So yeah, I'm pleased. It's fun.
Yeah, maybe a controversial opinion, maybe not, but the high quality editing is nice. It's definitely, there's a lot of value to it, but I think the biggest thing is just the topical or the marketing. It's like really having something that people are like actually interested in. You know what I mean? Getting those clicks, getting the click is half the battle, and getting to stay there is the other half the battle. That's probably like where the structure comes in, and maybe the editing and this and entertainment value. But yeah, I think if it's so hard, because you're like playing a psychological game, and that's like part one, and then part two is like actually having the meat and potatoes there.
Yeah, exactly. It's I was talking to a few people recently about it who are kind of broadly smart people, but like don't really know anything about YouTube. And the way that I've ended up describing it is, say you go to the supermarket and you want to go and buy a chocolate bar, you want to try something new. You look on the shelf and you're just like, well, you can't taste any of this stuff until you buy it, right? So you just end up having to pick something based on the way it looks. It's like it's very similar, and it's just it's that marketing thing. It's like you need an idea. You need the idea to be good, but you need the idea also to be marketable. Right? The idea needs to be packaged up in a way that's like somebody looks at it and goes, "Okay, I understand what this is about, and it looks interesting." Right? That's really it. It's like the funny thing about like thumbnails in particular. I don't want to go too much into the weeds about YouTube, but the funny thing about thumbnails is that there's a lot of like graphic design people who go like, "Oh, I can make a thumbnail for
Right.
this," and it's like the thumbnails they make are like works of art, but they're not necessarily like good thumbnails from like the YouTube specific perspective. Like you can make something much more simple, that's more eye catching, even though what they've done is like technically very, very
Mm-hmm.
is amazing, right? There's some technically amazing thumbnails out there, but if they don't catch the eye as much as it's just completely black with some white text on it, like, well, that's the one that actually wins, right? It's like it's
Right.
this weird
It's
thing.
weird.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, just spending more time
But
actually fiddling around doing it is not necessarily the best thing, but it's an eye catching thing.
in that aspect though, there's a lot of contrast in that, right? Like it's just 90% of the screen is black and then you just have this
Mm.
white text there. It's like it forces you to that's one thing I love about the thumbnails that don't have any text on them, because like it's like I look at the picture and it's like it's interesting. It's like, okay, well, like I want to know more, so then like I have to read the title,
Mm.
so like it forces me to read the title, which is kind of an interesting aspect too, assuming I'm
Yeah,
interested in the thumbnail to begin with, right?
exactly. And there's almost like a circular thing as well with like if everybody's got like, I mean, you actually almost saw this in the Tarkov world, which is that the first people coming out with the 3D like rendered
Mm-hmm.
thumbnails, they looked crazy, right? And it was just like everyone's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my goodness. But then like the more of them there are, kind of the more similar they all look, even though they all look great. Like once people get used to it,
Starts becoming a
you might almost be,
style.
but yeah, and you might almost
Mm-hmm.
be better off going back to like something more simple because in the list that one actually looks different and maybe catches the eye better. It's like if everyone's make beautiful thumbnails in the whichever space you are in YouTube, it doesn't really matter. And then someone just puts no effort in, and as I say, just puts like white text on a black background. That thumbnail will stand out amongst all the other really high contrast, super like loads of color and all this
Mm-hmm.
stuff. That one will stand out because it's so different sometimes. So sometimes it's almost a bit circular, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, I've heard that principle talked about. It's almost like anti-meta, or there's another word or phrase for it. It's like it's like you have all these rules for like thumbnail or design or whatever, and then you break
Mm.
them, and then that's the thing that like drives the clicks on the video, because it's like it's breaking the standard.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, it's fascinating. I actually really
Hmm.
enjoy the YouTube game. It's one of the reasons why
Yeah.
I don't, can sustain and just keep going because it is interesting all on its own. It's like its whole own field, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and guys like me making this stuff watch other people talking about making the thing. It's like its whole own industry. There's like loads of other people that I watch about, this strategy and that strategy, and what people are doing in other areas of YouTube that may be relevant as well. Like it's its whole own game too, which is cool. But yeah, I find that kind of stuff interesting and fun. So good. Anyway, let's get into what went on. So I think the order of events started with Chronicles of Vision itself,
Hmm.
which I don't really know what I was expecting from it, but the last one ended with Jaeger, right? And this one,
That was the
Jaeger was
Hounds
nowhere to be
one.
seen. Yeah, the Bloodhounds one. They were escaping
Yeah.
from the Bloodhounds and they go and find Jaeger. Presumably something happened, but like Jaeger's nowhere to be seen. Like this one opens up with them just basically like wandering through an abandoned town. Um, the long and the short of it is very cinematic, and there's lots of kind of emotion and stuff
Okay.
involved in it, which is it's cool. It's like a cool piece of like cinematography. It doesn't really drive forward the plot particularly. Basically, like Reggie's looking for a phone with internet signal so he can get on the ARS terminal. He gets in using this, like, I guess, a login that he's not used before. Maybe he gets that from Jaeger. I'm not sure. But the phone has got the pictures that we saw a while back. BSG posted a load of stuff. There was one of like Tan Pants Man being mugged by Rishala. There's like the blue head doctor speaking to Ragman.
Right.
There was like all of those
Yeah.
pictures. Those are all on the phone, and Reggie's like looking through them. And he sees Tan Pants Man being mugged by Rishala and says like, oh, it's Uncle Collier. Why is he mixed up in all this? And then the video where Sanatar and the Blue Haired Doctor are in labs, and labs gets basically raided, and like Reggie's dad's in the line of people. That one's also on the phone too, and like Reggie points his dad out, and because it was just, like, it was pretty much certain that was him, I think, because we'd seen him, in the clip before, and it looked like him in the video. But he confirmed that was his dad, and Tampants Man is actually in like the raiding party and goes and like to him specifically and is like you're okay kind of thing in the footage, which we knew about previously. So it's interesting actually that he's sort of involved in that, and it's actually Richie's uncle in some ways, which is pretty crazy. So once he's found the phone, he then goes and like concocts his plot to go and meet Gluhar. So he goes and finds Gluhar out in some kind of field camp or whatever, being covered by the sniper dude. And basically they have a conversation, and he's just like, what's my uncle Nikolai Stepanovich involved in all this for? Which is, I think that's his real name, Uncle Kolya. I think Kolya is a short name for Nikolai, because I think that's it's just the end
Sure.
thing. It's like a short and sort of like familiar version, I think, something along those lines. And Gluhar's just like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but you're going to need to get back into the terminal. He's like, I don't know. He says, like, is your uncle with you? Like, just don't ask me, because I don't want you. I don't know. I don't know anything about this, so whatever. And I had actually forgotten that Chepashila, back from the original Chronicles of Vision, had joined Gluhar. I'd forgotten that he was part of that group. But he actually breaks off and goes, I'm fed up of just like stacking cargo, so I want to join with you again. So Chepashila goes with Rigi, goes back to the sniper guy who's been going around with until then. But that's basically it. Like, the only other thing he says, like, how is Arshavir involved in all this, which is the name of Ragman, because he's in one of those pictures too. He asks Gluhar, like, how's he involved as well, and he just doesn't tell him anything. So that was basically it. But that kind of started off the ARRS event. I think that was the beginning of it, because they talk about it a bit, and Rigi and Gluhar are talking about it too. And that released kind of like something new within the augmented reality world. But yeah, it's interesting. I just don't really know what happened to the like where Jaeger was, or what his involvement was. I was kind of expecting a little scene with him. I'm a bit sad that there wasn't one. They just sort of cut from them running away from the Bloodhounds. Oh, it's Jaeger, and then like, oh, now he's going to go meet Gluhar. It's like, what happened? Maybe that's part of the intrigue. Maybe we'll find out later, or maybe it's just skipped over. We just have to guess. I don't know.
Yeah,
kind of
maybe
odd.
it's saved for like they want to explore that. Like, they're not ready to tell that side just quite yet.
Maybe
it has implications for the upcoming content / wipe.
Yeah, it could do. I mean, the only other thing that I would say about the whole thing is that I could have missed something. I read around a few different places about it. Not that many people have been discussing this latest Chronicles of Vision. I almost forgot that it had released, because, as I said to you just before we started, it came out while I was like busy at the weekend, and then I just kind of forgot about it, and because there was like the labs event and stuff. And I only remembered about it later in the week. But yeah, when I was looking around, not many people were really talking about it. And Nice Guy didn't do a video specifically on it yet. I don't know whether he's planning to. Maybe he will do soon. But he didn't specifically do a video on it. And usually that's where I kind of like piece together some extra info, because he goes like, oh, this community member noticed this, or this community member noticed this, right? Because he's sort of like the hub for that kind of like lore information. So like I had to look through a few places, and I'd forgotten about Chepashila until I think I've read it somewhere, because I was almost like, I haven't watched them from the beginning for a long time. And I was like, oh, who's this guy like leaving Gluhar's gang? That's kind of weird. When I watched it, and then reading some people's comments on Reddit, they were like, oh, it's funny that Chepashila's come back to him or whatever. And I was just like, oh yeah, that is Chepashila. Yeah, I just don't recognize him because I haven't watched like those ones for like a year or something. So I'd kind of forgotten. So there could well be stuff that is in there that's hidden that we've missed or not spotted, and there's maybe something else in there. But I did try to go through and remind myself of like who was which names and things, if in case there was any crazy links. But I haven't seen anything too nuts yet. It's just his links with his uncle and his dad, and that he's involved in some particular way. I don't really know. We will see. We will see. So this opened up the ARRS thing. This is the one. There was I think Nice Guy's actually making a video about this, because he's obviously King ARRS as well. This one was extremely complicated from what I can tell. Like, I'm not really a part of it because I'm just kind of too busy to do that. And I'd usually follow along as a macro level what's happening. This one was crazy. There was like, a load of stuff to unlock in the ARS terminal, like codes to break and whatnot. Like one of them was like Max Planck's constant, and like other physics stuff is like really weird. But then there were some physical posters around the world, in Tokyo, in Paris, I think maybe San Francisco, I'm not sure. Like it's somewhere in the States, and one in St. Petersburg as well. And there was people having to go out and go and get them. Oh, it was LA. Okay, someone's corrected me. It was in LA. And then people had to go and get them, and it was kind of like a recruitment poster for Terror Group with the blue haired doctor on the front saying, like, 10 times your salary and all this kind of stuff, which is kind of fun. But what it turned out was that there were actually like different branches to the ARS depending on the region around the world. Now, I don't know whether BSG intended for the different regions to work on those parts themselves, but that's not really how it goes, right? Like, Nice Guy is really the kingpin of all of it, and everybody pulls their resources together globally to get to an answer. But there were a couple of different branches, and I think the one that they managed to finish first was the Russian branch, and BSG actually did confirm to them that they'd finished that one first, and that unlocked the Scavs on Labs event, or like breaking into the lab security systems. But it sounds like if they completed one of the other ones, maybe the US one or maybe the European one, then they might have actually had a different outcome depending on which one they did, which is kind of interesting. There was like, there was like there was a note in one of them basically saying like, oh, your colleagues from another region got here first or something for a different piece of the ARS. And they're like, I bet you were wondering what might have happened. And there was like some hints that it could have been something different. But I'm not really sure. I think like, yes, as I said, Nice Guy's going to put out a more consolidated video about what actually happened with the ARS stuff. But like, it's crazy. They basically spent like 3 full days. I don't even know, like hundreds of people working on it, because like these things are not easy to break. And it seems like BSG are getting a bit better at what's the word? Sort of finessing it so it doesn't just get like immediately solved, which is quite cool. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I like that they've got that there, but I think it's a very small part of the community that actually gets to properly be involved in that.
Sure.
Which is, it's fine. Those people love it, and that's good. Okay.
Yeah, it's a very unique experience for them.
Exactly. So with all that said, they managed to then unlock the Scavs on Labs event, which we've seen one time before. I can't remember if it was last wipe or wipe previous to that. Maybe it was last wipe. I'm not sure. But needless to say, the Scavs on Labs event is probably one of my favorite events in all. Like, really? I really, really like it. It's so good. If I remember correctly, I think you might have had to pay as a PMC, but you didn't as a Scav. But this time, you don't have to pay as PMC for sure. So you just go and play, and it's crazy. I did like one sort of afternoon of streaming doing Scavs on Labs. It's just mindless entertainment. I just go in as a Scav, do random stuff, go as PMC, do random stuff, go as a Scav, do random stuff. Like, as PMC, you're basically just in there, like, as long as you dare, try to kill as many Scavs as possible. You end up racking up, like, insane amounts. Like, because there's Raiders there as well, AI Scavs, player Scavs. Like, it's absolute carnage. It's complete chaos. And you end up with, I think the best raid that I had was something like 14,000 XP or something. You kill, like, 20 to 30 Scavs and Raiders, and maybe, like, a PMC here or there. But, I mean, the PMCs are just, like, completely overrun, right? So you're, like, more likely to fight players than player Scavs. But I really, really like it. I think it's so good. It's, like, it's just very free. It's like playing, like, I don't know, CS free for all, like COD free for all or something. It's just like it's kind of dumb, but it's still Tarkov. You still have to extract.
Yeah,
it's like I like it. It's really cool, and it's especially good end wipe because you've just got infinite resources. Like I have been taking in, I think it was one of the guns we got given in the events from not events, but the whatever they're called, not drop type things that we got on Tarkov TV. There was like a short barreled M4, and I just like modded it a little bit to make it actually good. So I think they had the hybrid suppressor on it. I was just like, oh, I'm gonna be sick. Like I put this silencer co on that instead, and took it from 50 recoil down to like 26 or something. I was just like, yeah, boy, there we go. Let's do this. And just like 2 drum mags of 5.5A1, just like mowing down just like waves of Scavs, killing Raiders. Like it's so good. So yeah, I enjoy that event a lot, actually. I think it's super, super fun. And if people were thinking about getting, I mean, it might be done by the time that this goes out, I'm not sure. But it's been on for a couple of days. It might carry on, I'm not sure. But yeah, if anyone's thinking about learning labs or wants to learn labs or never got the chance to learn labs or whatever, like now is the absolute best time to learn labs. You get to run around all the corridors. Like people aren't doing the usual stuff of, they're like looking through planters with a voodoo with a 6x across the whole main hall, and like you poke your head out and just like out of a usual spot and they just kill you. Like it's completely different, right? It's like the whole map flow is just destroyed. And there's just Scavs everywhere. As a Scav, you could be running around, but you'll be killed by Raiders. Like, it's just carnage, absolute carnage. So it's great to learn the map because you get to go everywhere. I think that's one of the issues normally when you're learning something like labs is you feel very hemmed into the sort of safe bits. People tend to puddle around down in the basement, or they like skulk around in some of the stairwell bits because they feel like they can't be shot from lots of areas. Like if you're hanging around like Red Room and that kind of area, or like the key card rooms, you usually just get murdered by some Chad who is just looking for PvP. But it's just not the case during the Scav event, and it's so much fun. Yes, one thing someone mentioned in chat actually that was surprising to me was I went with a throwaway kit just to mess around on the first one because it's what I was doing some graphics tests, some like further graphics testing on my machine, and I had like an SKS with BP and a ceramic level 4 vest, and I just went into labs with it. I was just like, whatever, who cares? We'll just play with that for now as PMC because I've got it got it to hand, and I can't be bothered to change the kits out. I actually got it back in insurance. So whatever they did to open up whatever they did to open up the map, you're now getting your insurance back, which is also kind of interesting. Not that I think you might get that much back, honestly, because there's so many player scavs. It's crazy. But yeah, it's possible. So yeah, that's great fun. I love Scav Labs. It's one of my favorite things.
That's good.
Yep. Cool. So I mean, honestly, that's actually all I have for like proper Tarkov updates. I think that's everything that's going on right now. Oh, I guess like one other little addition was Nice Guy thinks that because of the way that the branching and the unlocking of events worked in the AROS, he thinks that this might be the last free wipe event, which seemed really weird to me. Yeah, this seemed really weird to me. So I either hope wipes soon or I hope he's wrong. One of the two. But I don't know. I mean, I find it hard to believe that this would be the last one.
They said August, right? They didn't say like into August, anything like that. They said August, right? In the Tarkov TV cast.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's what he said. So
I mean, it could come anytime.
I guess it's possible because I mean we only got 3. I mean, 4 more days technically, I guess, including today. That are in the month of July. So I mean, August 1st is just saying it's Tuesday. Good wipe. I don't know. I mean, it's possible.
Yeah. Someone just linked to me a tweet actually from Nice Guy from 2 days ago. And he said, yeah, another branch was finished and it talks about an event where all the bosses were on streets. That actually sounds cooler than Free Labs to me. Unfortunately, we didn't finish that branch first. So there were other events.
Oh. That's kind of interesting how they're doing this.
I actually disagree. I actually prefer Scavs on Labs than all the bosses on the streets. Like all the bosses on the streets to me, I just don't really play it. I don't know. I just they just kill you, Like, yeah, maybe that's okay. Maybe you can kill them or something, but they're just like, I much prefer fight against like 20 player scavs as a PMC than fight against Gluhar. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that might just be a product of the AI. Well, yeah, I mean, it is a product of the AI, but at the same time, fighting players is always, in my opinion anyways, more interesting than fighting any type of AI, no matter how good your AI system is.
Exactly. So, yeah, I don't know. That's just, that's where we're at. That's where we're at. It's certainly interesting, all of this stuff. I don't know what's coming. I hope that we get the wipe soon. But, we're not on like pacing of events or anything like that. So,
yeah,
very hard to know.
I'm not too bothered about the wipe right now, simply because the stuff I'm dying to play with is not coming in this wipe, so I'm not too bothered by it. I mean, I'll probably check it out, but who's to say how much I actually be invested, right? I mean, the early games for me always a pleasure, but yeah, I'm more eager for that December season.
Absolutely. I've been asked a bunch of times like what I think is the most important update coming in August, and other than like performance and technical stuff, which is probably the most important thing, like gameplay wise, it's like what we said last time. It's probably the pistol sidearm swap, right? There's nothing else fundamental coming. Like the streets expansion, yeah, cool. Boss on streets, cool. So it's like street stuff, but gameplay wise for the other maps, so you're playing customs. Like what's going to be different? Like really anything? There's going to be a couple of more guns, but
there'll be some new toys.
Like the pistols,
right?
The pistol sidearm swap thing, I think it's the only thing that makes like a potentially fundamental change to the gameplay. Honestly,
yeah.
So what are you waiting for? Well, yeah.
Are we getting the? I can't remember. Are we getting the loot randomizer box spawns?
We are getting the loot randomizer box spawns.
That'd be something to test with. That could be. I'm
Yeah, it
actually pretty
might.
curious how that behaves. Like we've joked about when we first heard about that news. If there's going to be a weapons case in the middle of the street, that if it's that extreme, I don't think it will be. But if it's that extreme, like it could just spawn, it's like floating above construction or something. That's probably more bugged, but what I mean, it could be interesting. I mean, there might be some fun. I could see some things where it's like, especially like, oh man, I wonder if they're gonna do caches like that too. That'd be a big one. I imagine it's just gonna be on or off binary. Like, hey, this spawn, you got all the weapon cases spawn essentially, weapon crates, and they're either like they spawned in their usual location or they didn't spawn at all. That's my like. If I'm setting the bar low, that's where I would put it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's gonna be. We're gonna have to see. It's quite funny actually on that sort of topic. I did the quest yesterday. You have to go and do the pixel search in the trailer for that early quest on customs.
Yes,
I did that quest yesterday on hardcore with the new method. I think when I went there this wipe, I think it was the same for me, just randomly. But when I went there on hardcore, it was like the little thing wasn't there, and I was just like, "This thing's already super annoying to find." I was like, "Really? Is it now? This is somewhere else." So I had to like scour the carriage, just like it was like stuck underneath one of the like little box things. It's just like, nah. But yeah, I mean, for actual crates, it should be more interesting. I do hope that they've moved them around, that they're in different places, or maybe they're not there, maybe they are there, and there's lots of dynamic places they could be. But that would require a lot of work, I think.
Yeah, I would think so.
You got to place these like ghost templates of a million different crates and make sure that when they all spawn, they don't end up doing something stupid or whatever. What would be fascinating is if they do that for stashes.
Yeah, I mean,
stashes may or may not spawn. That'd be kind of interesting.
You need some type of like procedural system to be like, inform.
Yeah.
Here's the rule sets. As long as it stays, like it doesn't spawn. There's no clipping. It's like knows to like be on the ground. Or on like a lowest surface that it can without clipping. Like there's if they did it that extreme, very impressive. Really cool. But if not, it's okay.
Exactly. So what are you waiting for then, Church? What are you excited about from the December wipe?
Recoil. Dude, I just like, oh man, like honestly, I was doing some like cinematic stuff, and it's like, I haven't played Tarkov in quite some time, as you know, and like, oh my god, dude, the movement alone is just feels really like so. I just don't know. It just kind of feels gross when you're coming back to it. It's just weird, you don't have that muscle memory built up for like the delayed keystroke. It's like, I don't know, it's just kind of awkward, but mainly the recoil, because man, it's pretty rough. So actually, I got a question for you. What has the feedback been like for your video?
It's been,
which if you didn't know, Giga put out a recoil rework video, by the way.
Yeah, which was kind of based on the conversation that we had last week. Mainly, that was really where, like, we thrashed out the mechanics in a very chaotic freestyle sort of way, and then I went away and thought about it a bit more, and actually just watched a few other people, like saw a few other people's reactions and that kind of thing. It was pretty good in general, honestly. Like, I actually had a lot of people just being like, I agree with everything, which I was kind of surprised. That doesn't usually happen.
Yeah.
There was some constructive criticism in general, some people saying that, and I think the thing is, like, not that I disagree necessarily with anyone about their comments on my suggestions, but a lot of my answers to people, because I did reply to quite a few of them, maybe like originally, I've probably got 3 days of comments just like backed up over that I've been not able to get to as of yet, but I did reply to most people, and a lot of them were kind of like, this is going to feel bad because X. Like, if you have the 3 rounds before you get any vertical, it's just going to feel weird. And my main answer is like, maybe. Like without trying it, you just actually you can't know, to be honest. So I'm not sure. Like I think some people just took not necessarily offense to that, but that was the thing that they didn't like the most about how it just was a bit strange. But I don't know. I just feel that just like looking at some of the other Recoil, just like zooming in on certain clips with the MP5 and like having the shots go like ba bang, ba bang,
Yeah.
ba bang. You know, the second shot always goes high, even with something like an MP5 SD. It just feels kind of crappy, right? Like I think it would just feel way better if it was like bang, bang, bang. Then the third shot rises maybe slightly, and then it's like much more gradual. It wasn't feel so because like a 2-round burst is just impossible. Like you can't really control that, right?
Yeah.
It's so hard, and you have to do it each time, right? You have to move the mouse each time. It's just like so crazy. There was some people who were saying like, "Oh, burst is burst is obviously going to be easier to control because it's like more even and it's less less jumpy than it was before." I'm just like, well, it still jumps, and people are still going to use full auto. So I disagree with that.
I mean,
I had a bunch of people.
At the bare minimum, you're making a trade off for volume over accuracy. So like, who's this? Even if they were to, more people prefer burst. Is that necessarily a bad thing that people are preferring accuracy over volume? And
yeah, like it depends, right? There were some people who honestly rightly pointed out and said just like, is it a problem with full autos the meta? Like, does it matter?
Does
it really matter? Which I actually was like, well, that's actually pretty fair.
Yeah.
Like, does it matter? Like, do we really care that burst isn't really used? I think, well, maybe. It's I don't know. I just feel that there's that kind of like weird middle ground. I think a lot of people would say that just like the first couple of shots are just like so much harder than the rest. It just feels weird to me.
Yeah. I think a lot of people share that sentiment.
Exactly. So, and something needs to be done about that. Maybe it's not the way that I do it or whatever. I mean, there's a ton of people who are just like, I don't know why they're so holding on to PMC auto compensation so strongly. They should just get rid of it completely. Or like, I don't know why you included it in the suggestion. And I was just like, well, they said that they said they're not going to get rid of it, right? So I tried to do it's a compromise. It's like, here's the closest, like, here's what they proposed, and here's what I think they should do, which is as close to what they want, but also getting what we want, right? Like, to be perfectly honest with you, I actually don't really care. And I don't know whether this is an unpopular opinion. I don't really care whether they get rid of auto PMC control or not, to be perfectly honest with you. Like, whether the gun levels out at the end and just gets held in place, or it continues to rise, it actually doesn't bother me that much. Like if you play something like BattleBit where it goes up continuously, once you've learned how to do it, it doesn't really bother you, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. So whether it stops or not, as long as it's like kind of gradual, I don't think it really matters.
Yeah.
It's just like maybe it changes very slightly the difficulty, the perceived difficulty of holding full auto. So I don't really know. The only other one that was a few people coming on there was a couple of like, well, actuallys, about burst fire in real life and all this stuff. And I was just like, dude, like whatever. Like, this is a balancing thing. I'm not really necessarily talking about, burst per se as well. Like this is just can be like the first few shots of full auto spray. And we're just trying to like make these things even between each other rather than being stuck with like different systems for different types of shots, which encourages gaming the system and all of that kind of stuff. It just ends up getting kind of weird. I feel like Church has got frozen. I'm sure he'll be back in 2 secs. We care because it's unrealistic. Tarkov is supposed to be as realistic as playable. I get that sentiment, but I think one of the biggest problems, and maybe I'll reiterate this once Church comes back, one of the biggest problems with the realistically as playable thing is like, how do you realistically simulate a gun that someone's not actually holding? Like it's kind of it's hard, right? It's difficult. It's not very easy, and so we have to accept some like gaminess to the system to make it feel real, right? It's like the realism thing. I really do think should be replaced, and lots of people have spoken about this across the Tarkov community. The realism thing should be replaced with immersion. Genuinely, it should be replaced with immersion, because if you want realism, then we're not allowed CMS kits and all sorts of other stuff. Like Tarkov isn't striving, despite what they say, it isn't striving to be a realistic game, right? Because you could play the game before CMS kits, That was playable, but they added CMS kits because it's a good game design mechanic. So the game became less realistic, but a better game. So they're not striving for realism, like as realistic as playable. It's just. I just don't think it's true. I just don't think it's true. I just don't think it's true, right? And so, I think we're allowed to take some liberality or some, we're allowed to take some creative license where we need to make the game feel more consistent and stuff. I think that's fine.
It's a blue screen, which, I mean, not too surprised because yesterday I was like, had my editor open and had Tarkov running in the background and had a million tabs open and was streaming. So I blue screen, or what happened? I think the editor crashed. Yeah, it crashed, and the computer was freaking out. So, which I was anticipating, given all the stuff I was doing. So I'm not surprised at blue screen. But the weird thing happened is when I launched back up, it was as if I was on like Windows 11 with like my desktop had like a different like the default wallpaper. There was like less icons, so I had to restart. It was, I've never seen that before. PC
Super
woes.
PC woes are the worst. I agree.
Yeah. So, all right, how's that? I'm back. Why am I not back?
Nearly. Sometimes I need to do this.
No, I think it's on my end.
It's still on your end.
Let me launch the technical difficulties. Please stand by. Let's see. Let's talk about that, maybe. Where is camera? All right. Now we're cooking.
Good. Where did I get up to? What was I saying just before you got frozen? We were talking about recoil in general.
Of course.
And
I mean, last I remember you were saying like full auto is not necessarily like why is full auto a bad thing, and
yeah, was that the one that's like, full auto being meta is not necessarily a problem?
I mean, that's kind of what I last remember ish.
Something along those lines. Yeah, so it was that combined with people talking about burst IRL not being a thing that people actually use, but it was there to. I got like a full like Wikipedia history lesson in a couple of the comments about burst fire was supposed to stop untrained rookies from dumping their mag by accident and only wasting 3 bullets and all of this stuff.
Okay.
Which I was like, okay. I'm not really sure what that tells us about this system, whatever. Basically, like all I want from the system is I want it to feel smooth and consistent, and I don't want it to feel like there's these kind of like weird step changes. I don't want to introduce weird stuff because this happens, right? And we've seen this with other systems. Things like where semi-auto, because it never goes vertically ever. I don't know how it works if you spam. I'm not sure. We haven't been shown that, so we can't know yet.
Right.
But say if you just go like, say you put a macro on just for argument's sake. I know it's against TOS, but say you did for argument's sake. Would the gun never rise? Would it just go in the same spot the whole time? Like, is that going to be super OP? Because it's like, oh, well, I may as well never hold down the full auto button now, because then full auto, I've got the whole rise thing, and I have to control that, and it's just annoying. I may as well just go with my trigger finger and just like press it a bunch. Like maybe that's going to be better. And there was a ton of people saying as well, and I think we had this conversation already, which was, I don't like the way it jumps around. It nerfs semi-auto compared to the way it is now. And I'm like, okay, that's fair. I get that. But we're looking at unmodded guns for a start. If these guns are modded and the recoil is reduced by 80%, like it would be for an M4, for example, that jump around the reticle might be really small. It might be tiny. And now that you don't have any vertical jump, there's no rhythmic nature anymore. It's now you just go all in the same spot. And people are just going to instantly get killed with the time to kill. Like it might actually be a buff to semi-auto. We don't know until we test it. We have to try. And so it might make a semi-auto like super OP compared to full auto. I mean, to be honest, maybe that would balance it, right? It's like as fast as you can click the trigger, it'll go within probably this circle. But clearly with an M4, you can't hit 800 RPM manually with your mouse. Or maybe some people can. I don't know, but accurately probably not. It's easier to just hold the button down. So I don't know. We're gonna have to test it. It's coming to ETS, as Clean said. He posted a tweet out saying like, BSG confirmed it's coming to ETS, so we will get to test it, but we need to try it. We need to try it with the crap guns. We need to try it with the meta guns. We need to try it with the slow RPM guns. We need to try it with the Vector. We need to try it with the Glock 18C. We need to try it on semi. We need to spam it. We need to do it slow. We need to do full auto a little bit. We need to test all these different things. And I want them to feel consistent. I don't want you to be able to spam single shot and it then like avoid the full auto mechanic, right? You kind of want all these things to broadly get. You want a unified system, I think, so that nothing feels weird. Systems that aren't unified in the past have ended up with weird thresholding or breakpoints or circle strafe or whatever, like other things that you can avoid the mechanics that are there
Right.
because you do something that they didn't quite think of. All of this stuff. So that's where I stand on this. And I'm not wedded to my system, but just it's an interesting one. Like I had a couple of conversations with some other people and just someone in chat as well while you were off about like how you make a realistic recoil system when you're not actually holding the gun and all you get to do is see where the shots go. Like, what does that actually look like? And there are examples. People have said Insurgency Sandstorm and look at COD as well, because COD's like even Veritas in his BSG The Game Sucks video referenced COD and showed that, which is pretty good. It's more like a vibrate. It's sort of, I don't know, it kind of is a bit like the semi-auto system they put in place. Kind of.
Semi-auto system they put. Oh,
yeah, this new one from BSG, like the jump around the point. Like COD's kind of like that, but
except the whole like it stops moving and then it just stays there and wobbles left and right. That's the main difference. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. Like there's a few ways to do it, but I think this one could be okay. Honestly, I think it could be fine.
Hey, you brought up an interesting thing. Why don't they just get rid of the what auto what's it called? Auto compensation, convergence, whatever you want to call it. And as I was telling Giga before we started, I've been having a chat with the creator of the Realism for Tarkov SP, and we've been chatting about recoil. And so I had mentioned, the whole Tarkov's recoil is a physics-based system, blah blah blah. blah. And so he had corrected me and said, that's not physics-based, it's procedural animation. And so I was like, okay, I need to look up that because I'm not really entirely sure what that means. And so in Unity, it looks like they have this procedural animation system where you take the model, the bones, and you set this is like point A, like this is position A. Like the example they use is like a 4-legged spider robot thing. It's like you lift one leg up and you set the point, and then you lift the leg down, set the point, and then the system sort of like, I think this is gonna be a very I spent like 5 minutes looking at this, but I think it like fills in those gaps and also takes data from the game world to inform it's better. So like it knows like, hey, there's a rock here that this spider robot's trying to climb up. So like it doesn't like it, when the leg goes down, it actually touches the rock, it takes information from the game world. So in that regards, what does that mean about the recoil system? The player's recoil, weapon movement, and camera movement, arm movement are based on what they called springs. There's still, of course, canned animation for lots of things. So like things that they manually animated, like I'm assuming certain aspects of like the check mag. I think it's a bit of a mixed bag. Like some things are like handmade that don't use any procedural stuff. Maybe it's like split. I don't know. The weapon essentially acts like a big spring on a recoil. So I think how it works is essentially auto compensation, or again convergence, is essentially tied into how they handled animations. So and I think that's why they are not totally in love with the idea of scrapping the auto compensation, because they would probably have to scrap all that animation work they did and start, you know what I mean? Like I don't know how much they could scrap, but it sounds like it's going to be even more work. Not only coming up with new recoil, system or methodology, but also now they have to reanimate stuff. And as you already know, the animation looks really great in Tarkov. So I can see why there's been a lot of like resistance from BSG's end. So that makes sense. So yeah, I just want to clarify that and also set the record straight. It's not a physics system. I'm sorry. It's procedural animation. But I still think that's actually really smart on their end to utilize that. Because I think it works. But so having a chat with him, it's interesting because what he's done is, well, okay. Let me say this first. There's actually within the game and its server side as well. There's already something built in to where you can have the guns recoil to the shoulder instead of pivot on the pistol grip.
Okay.
Which I was really fascinated by, and it's this thing called Recoil Crank, which I've seen before, and it's kind of one of those things like people are like, yeah, we don't really know what this does. But essentially, what I did is I did a quick little test. I just like turned it on. It's just a like global modifier. It's not like an on per gun basis. I didn't like test like a pistol. I wonder like what a pistol would look like. But I did a quick little test, and it's like a basic AK. I think it's like an AKS 74, and I had it on, did like a couple single shots, and then a full auto, and then turned off the recoil cranked, launched the game back up, and then shot it again, and then I compared the footage, and it's really fascinating because that's the only thing I touch, but the actual the gun's still like the barrel still goes way up, right? Because you still got the high recoil, and the convergence is at default or whatever. But the difference is the way the gun, and like in the vanilla like standard version, it goes up and it doesn't like recoil back, whereas in the modded version, you can physically see it. Like if you look at the bottom of the your sight picture, you can like see like the back of the AK dust cover and like a little bit of the stock. You can see it like physically move back in, and then what happens is like the sights, like your rear sight actually gets bigger too, which is interesting.
That is interesting.
So I thought that was interesting. I wouldn't say it necessarily was, it's like, I guess from a technical perspective, I'm not positive about a visual perspective, but like a technical perspective, this is the way the gun should operate. Like it should be moving back into your shoulder, right? But I can't say it's like fundamentally better because your rear sight's getting bigger, and you're like it almost looked like you're losing a little bit of your front post sight, like even when it leveled out. So anyways, I came back to it later, and so what I did was I was like, okay, well, I know that in the game horizontal recoil, that stat you see, affects the is essentially the gun moving back into the shoulder, right?
Yeah.
So I forced that to 0, and then I use the global modifier for vertical and horizontal recoil. That's by default 20, which is the the 1212 thing introduced, and I set that to 100. So the gun stat in game, the horizontal says 0, but really it's 100 because I think by default, it's it's a lot higher. It's like 300 or something with mods. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I tested that, and it was better, but it still has the barrel rising like super high. Like I mean, it's that really doesn't fix. So then I turned that. What I did is I set the convergence up to like I multiply it by 3. I don't know what.
So something like 4.5 or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what the AKS is by default.
I think it's 1.6 or something.
Okay.
Something like that.
So I did that, and it feels, if it's much better to shoot, but the problem is you still have this thing where there's it's like there's a rise to it, and then it like it flatlines, and it's still the same issue where the full auto is still really strong. It's just, it's been like scaled down much more.
Yeah.
So there's some type of mechanism or outcome that happens because of these mechanisms where inherently the spring sort of like gets pushed on, and then as it gets pushed on, it starts pushing back, right? And it levels itself out. So it's kind of problematic because it essentially, no matter what you do, it sort of like forces or heavily encourage you to reach that point where the spring pushes back, and naturally, single tap or burst doesn't build enough kinetic energy to do that consistently, right? To get that, I guess, like maybe there's like some type of like you know, medium or happy spot. Anyways, so talking with him some more, um, what he's done is he's actually set the convergence or auto compensation very high, almost. It's like around 6 or 7, which is
Oh,
like,
right. That's interesting.
yeah, which is extremely high. I mean, that's like, literally 6 times as much on some guns, maybe about 3 times on certain guns. But in addition to that, because that essentially makes the guns feel extremely snappy, right? What he's done is he's I'm just gonna read it. I can tweak the viability of burst fire by increasing or decreasing the vertical increase multiplier for the first 2 or 4 shots or whatever. So he has it set up where these first couple of shots get multiplied. There's like a multiplier that affects it. So even though initially it's very like the single shot, it's like extremely low recoil, very snappy. As you continue to fire, it sort of like increases with continuous fire, the actual
Hmm.
vertical recoil, but I believe the convergence is the same, right?
Yeah.
But what he mentions here, and you may have to help me understand this concept because I don't know if I'm fully grasping it, but what's crucial is he also kept the convergence stat inversely proportional to the vertical recoil stat. So if the starting ratio of convergence to vertical recoil is 100 vert to 5 convergence, when recoil hits 200 convergence, or yeah, when recoil hits 200, convergence will be at 2.5. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Yeah.
So
So
100
he's tied the
vertical is
two
at
stats
5,
together.
but they're
Yeah.
inversely proportional.
Exactly. So he's tied the two stats together such that, I mean, lower recoil is good, higher convergence is also good. So
Mm-hmm.
these two things go in tandem. It's not like one
Mm-hmm.
cancels the other. They both actually come together. So if you have 100 vertical recoil and you've got 2.5 convergence or something, the gun is moderately snappy, but the recoil is relatively high. If you halve that to 50, the convergence goes up to 5, which is even more, there's stronger auto control, but the vertical recoil jump is actually smaller as well. So basically the impact of decreasing vertical recoil actually is like compounded in that model. It's like more than you would get in normal Tarkov because it increases your return to center shot time, which is better for semi. It also then decreases the height of the full auto spray pattern and decreases the height of the max peak of the round spray pattern too. It decreases everything. It, like each individual shot shoots lower. It returns to center quicker. The spray pattern is shorter than it would have been otherwise, and the full auto pattern is closer to the initial impact as well. It's like all of those 4 things all at once.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, if the starting recoil is 100, which is, it's a little on the high, but it's low relative to what we're getting in that, and the convergence is 5, which is pretty high. He then scales it up as you're shooting to 200 recoil, which is more recoil, and the convergence is lower to 2.5, which is
Oh, is this while he's
worse.
shooting?
See,
This
this
is
is the
during a
thing,
particular, like, say this is during a full auto.
right? This is the thing I'm not sure about. I need to get some clarification because previously he's talking about tweaking the viability of burst fire by increasing the vertical multiplier for the first 2 or 4 shots or whatever he wants to do there. But then he follows up. What's also crucial is he keeps the convergence stat inversely proportional to recoil stat. And he says, so if the starting ratio of convergence to recoil is 100 vert to 5 convergence, when the recoil hits 200, convergence will be at 2.5. So I don't know, because he says
kind of interesting.
if the starting ratio, right? So like I when I'm trying to, I need to like follow up. We've been going back and forth.
Yeah.
And I need to like clarify that if that is a just sort of a fixed principle. If the recoil is this, then I set the gun to this based off this relationship this ratio I came up with, or if this ratio is like applied throughout time. Which I
Yeah,
think
because that's the thing. Like, I
Mhm.
don't know, right? I'm not into the nuts and bolts of the underlying system, so it's hard for me to know. I think that's maybe I've heard maybe like rumors of that before, that the recoil increases, or there's like a different multiplier for the first shots or something, and that like in Tarkov the first shots actually have a recoil increaser on them, which is why the initial burst is so bad, and then it levels out with all the other stuff. Whereas it sounds like he's kind of taken that away. He's gone the other way and taken it away for the first few shots, and then had it increase as the subsequent shots go on. But if that's through a full auto burst, then that basically makes the first couple of shots kind of stable,
Right.
and then it increases the vertical recoil of the weapon in the back end as the sort of full auto continues, which then decreases the convergence, and that actually will, so you'll shoot, it'll get to kind of where it should be based on your current convergence stat. But then as convergence leaks away, as the recoil increases, that will actually make the spread pattern get wider,
Right.
and also move higher as time goes
Yeah.
on, because the auto control is actually getting weaker as the vertical recoil is coming back in, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, it's one way of doing it for sure. It's kind of cool, but I think like I really do think though that that's great. Like, don't get me wrong, that's really good. It's just it's this initial thing that needs to be fixed. Like if he's smoothed that bit out at the beginning and make it feel more smooth to start firing, I think that's better. And that's why I actually don't think necessarily that this system is a disaster from BSG's side. Is that the random reticle bounce is like maybe kind of weird, but it stops the, but like if you had the old system, it stops the the initial burst from just laser beaming onto one spot, which is a problem that I did talk about with a few other commenters actually on my video. And I was like, well, the fact that the reticle jumps around randomly, that actually prevents this, because you don't have any chance to fix that, right, when you've got the button held down. But you don't get any natural rise either. So with semi-auto, you get a chance to move it. With burst, you don't. And then it should be sort of smooth from there. I also feel like, I don't know whether it would actually necessarily feel weird having that system, or the system that with the guy that you've talked to. Maybe it would feel okay, because we have to remember, right, when you're on full auto, even with 600 RPM weapons, the first 3 shots happen pretty quickly. It's not that long a time, right? So it'll be bang, bang, and then the recoil will begin. It's almost like, it comes back into it's like bang, bang, and sort of hits that point, and then it starts to rise, and then levels out. Like, it might feel fine. It might feel comfy. I don't know. We have to try it.
Yeah. I mean, to quote Oppenheimer, theory will only take you so far. That's, I mean, absolutely. It's, yeah, because I mean, that's kind of where we'd start off originally. Was I was asking him like, why did you even bother changing the recoil in the first place? And and I think one of his responses was like, it punishes burst, semi-auto, and in too many cases, right? And so I do think, I do like how there's this like trade-off where like the gun feels really good to shoot and single and burst, and full auto, like it feels good initially, but like eventually it just becomes kind of unwieldy, because you got that recoil going up, convergence going down, and you could still like fight it if you want to, but you're sort of paying a penalty. And the other thing he did that was interesting. So he said, "We'll see." Yeah, I'll get to that in a second. But let me look at. Okay, so I asked him like, why doesn't spam firing work in full auto? Because I was like, yeah, when I first got your hands on it and I was playing around with it, I was like, huh. Uh, I was trying to break the system. I was like, oh, I can't break it because I thought, since as you full auto, it gets worse. I was like, oh, I'll just won't full auto. I'll just like rapidly spam mouse one to sort of like simulate a fake full auto, but that didn't work. And so he put in a timer has to elapse before recoil is reset to back down to the base value. I guess that 100 vertical 5 convergence. So I was like, okay, that was pretty smart. That was a good. It's just out of pure curiosity. I asked him, I was like, okay, did you think of that ahead of time, or is that something you found in your testing? Whatever. And he's like, no, that's something that I found out in testing. Which is kind of just like a testament to like we need to test whatever it happens. Like it needs to be tested. So I'm glad it's coming to ETS, right?
Exactly. That's almost the same as what I talked about in my video, right? I talked about the semi-auto and this like the vertical recoil element or whatever it is that you want, some kind of spread increase and a difficulty to control the weapon of some form. A bit like the heat system. That's why I made that analogy, because I think it's easy for you to understand, right? Each shot adds to this some variable. So it goes each shot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And as time goes on, so you lose 1 every second. So it's you shoot bang 1, 0, bang 1, 0, bang 1, 0. But if you go bang, 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 it goes like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 5, and it's like you're building up this bar's continuously decreasing, but you're adding to it too quickly. And so you add to this kind of like uncontrollability, whatever you want that to be, whether that's vertical rise, horizontal spread, whatever it is. And that unifies these systems, right? That stops you from having exactly what he found in his testing, which is, we're going to have this semi-auto system, which is, it's easy to control. But now people are just clicking the button really fast because there's no downside. You need to make semi-auto and full auto. They all need to be part of the same system.
Right.
And I think that's one thing I didn't necessarily do that well in my video was that I think when I said burst, people like laser focused in on like the burst mode on the MP5. Like some people got it. I think most people did get it, but some people are just like really focused in on just like the burst mode on certain weapons. And I'm just like, it's not really what I mean. I mean, it's like you shooting 3 or 4 times, with on full auto. That's also what I mean. Actually, it doesn't.
Right.
To me, I don't really care which way it is. I don't think burst should be its own special thing. It's like, yeah, it's a mode to allow you to shoot 3 bullets, but shooting 3 bullets with full auto, as long as you can use the mouse to make it do it, should be the same. They're the same thing to me. So it's just, it's about the unification of the system. I think it's important to do that, and they found out that too. So that's interesting that we've kind of come to the same conclusion independently while they've been implementing their system. That's fun.
Another interesting part is camera recoil, and he had some very interesting stuff to say in regards to that. So one thing he had mentioned was that he feels as though there's sort of like a crusade against camera recoil, but it's sort of like wrongfully accused of being this villain. Let me see if I can find the exact. There's literally just like paragraphs and paragraphs I have to scroll through.
I'm sure. I mean, while you're finding it, I don't know whether you saw, but we had Numbers of Tarkov on the cast a while back. Numbers of Tarkov actually released a new video.
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah.
3 days ago, which is about the recoil rework, and he talks about this exact same thing. Because I watched his video before making mine, and I agreed with him about camera recoil as well. It's like he basically said what I said because I agreed with him, is that the recoil and the camera recoil, they need to be in line, right? If the camera goes way above the gun, that feels really dumb. If the camera doesn't go anywhere and the gun lifts up, that also just feels really awkward and weird. They need to be aligned together so that these things make sense. I'm assuming that's what he is going to say.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and in that work in progress, it seems like the camera recoil is like extremely low. That or the gun recoil was high. Like I don't know, it was kind of weird because it really did like climb up, but it didn't have that flip effect. Like it's almost like they had something going on where the recoil and I don't know, because it's really hard to say, but that was one thing that kind of was off-putting for me, was like how it's like my camera recoil is like barely moving, so like my sights are like 75 to 80% higher up on my screen, than they normally were. I don't know.
Yeah, which is really weird. I agree with you though. It did seem like some stuff had been changed such that maybe they fixed the flip. It's hard to tell without using it, trying it yourself and seeing. But from what we saw, it looked like at least some of the flip issues had been fixed. With the voodoo, I know the voodoo looked awful, right? Because it looked like it was in that bugged mode where
they definitely
you use like the side look and then you like decrease the FOV because it looked like it was in just regular FOV. The voodoo it didn't have any like FOV changes, but they were still like blacking out. And when you fired, it appeared at the top and bottom as it bounced around. So it's obviously not perfectly fixed, but it did seem better. I mean, we're looking through red dots and not really that visible there in general, but like the sight stayed inside the frame of the red dot, which is important. And like those things, I mean, I talked about that in mine and I said, like, I can't really tell. Like, it looks better. Some people have said it looks better, but it's so hard to know whether that has been fixed, like the actual flip itself. But I mean, it's important that they do that. I mentioned it. I hope they do it. So, yeah.
So he says, I'll just quickly read this. Camera recoil is just the camera pivoting towards where the vertical recoil is going. It has issues like you can see in Realism mod, where if you were to mag dump a 60 round, eventually you lose your sight picture. That's something I could work on. Both the rework coming, there's a little point. For some reason, Reddit got obsessed with it, as if it was the issue. If EOT's recoil is mostly visual. If it was fully removed, then they got to pivot away from the player, which we saw in numbers of Tarkov's videos. It wouldn't fix any fundamental issues of EOT's recoil because she has already reduced it by a lot. Ideally, the camera should somehow pivot in such a way that it stays exactly behind the scope, but that's tricky. And I think that is kind of a very difficult problem that they have to solve, because they have to play with knobs on one, side, and then they have to play with knobs on the other side that's like related but not directly, so it's very tricky.
Because those things might be completely different.
I think
one's a symptom of this like physics-based spring thing. The other one's just like a different model that's disconnected to that. Like maybe they can connect them somehow in a way that ties one to the other, and then works in all scenarios. Like easier said than done, honestly. Like what happens with a pistol? Like you don't want to tie the camera recoil to the recoil for a pistol, because then your view would fly up in the air every time you shot.
Right.
It's like things like that. Like you got. And people go like, "Oh, it's so easy, just don't know." Because it's not. This stuff isn't easy. This is not easy. Right? If anybody has ever had any experience building any system ever in their life, you will know that these things go wrong. It looks easy for 90% of cases, and 10% of things on the fringe that you didn't think of were weirdly coded. Didn't work for the standard model for whatever reason. Those things end up taking 90% of the time to fix, because you can't just slap a few variables in and make it all work. That's the problem. So I hope they come to some kind of solution. I really do, but it's not easy to do. I mean, they've got to do it, right? If they want to make this good, they have to do it. One big thing is that it did look like they threw together the work in progress shot very quickly, right? There's no zooming in on the scope when they ADS. When you fire, I think Numbers actually noticed this. I didn't even spot this. The scope reticle, like, delayed for like one frame or something. It like leaves the actual scope, like the scope moves and the reticle doesn't move for like one frame, which is like really funny. But it's all like super janky because they've just like thrown this like work in progress model together, which is honestly a good thing. If they were like, we've been working on this for 6 months and this is really we just want you to do the final check over this thing, that would be super, super scary, right? But the fact that Nikita was just, because some people are like, oh, I don't know why they showed it in this state. I'm just like, I'm so glad they showed us in this state.
Yeah, for sure.
And they said, we want feedback, make videos, make stuff on social media, go and like test it, and don't just write, this is an L on Twitter. Like, that's not useful. Go, like, critique the system, come up with something, like, just try. Like, what do you actually want? Tell them what you actually want. They'll bring it all together and hopefully we'll get something good out of it. Who knows, right? But we can at least try.
I'm still stunned that they, released the work in progress because of how many L's they're gonna cop, bro. Ratio, I was just
Nikita's there with his huge net.
I was just surprised, but I'm happily surprised. Absolutely. Okay, so a few other things, and let's see. So one thing he did that I was unaware of. He actually has the mouse sensitivity decreasing whenever you fire the gun, which I was kind of like baffled by.
What was his reasoning for that?
Yeah, so he made a statement which I challenged him on, and he said most games mouse sense or input is decreased when firing, make it hard to control. EFT's recoil feels very bizarre in that you can point the gun anywhere effortlessly while firing, and makes controlling recoil feel very strange compared to other shooters. Which, I kind of, well, that aside, I kind of see what he's saying. It's a bit like I was playing Tarkov, and I was jumping around, and it's kind of like refamiliar myself with Tarkov. But I noticed like my your mouse sensitivity gets like heavily dropped when you jump. Same with like sprinting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was like my gut reaction was like ew, But like thinking about it is like, I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? Like if in real life, if I'm jumping, I can't just like jump, turn around 360. You know what I mean? I have to like already be moving in that direction to like objects in motion, state of motion type of thing. So like okay, I kind of see what they're going for. It's not perfect, but it kind of makes sense. But like kind of the same thing, right? If you're like shooting a gun, like you shouldn't just be able to effortlessly, whip it around and do this thing. It's like, you know what I mean? Like it's
maybe
you got something pushing in to you, right? Like there's some type of force. So like I kind of get that. He's trying to simulate that a bit. So like jumping to his reasoning, well, so like one thing I did ask him about was like, can you list a game, because I'm not aware of one, and I think he said, what did he say? He said he may have misspoke. Some games will have recoil increase exponentially. If you look at a graph, it'd be like a line going up and never plateauing. Which, oh man, I can't think of one, because like a lot of like the ones I think of are like more linear, like CS:GO.
I think
or
Squad
Rust.
is like that.
Okay.
I'm not an expert, but I think Squad is that way. It's like it really shoots off into the sky. I don't know what they've done recently. It was years since I played Squad, but I think.
Should have that check, because that definitely could be the case. I mean, I could see that the longer it's that idea, like the longer you full auto, the more unwieldy it gets, right? Like you're constantly
something like that,
fighting it. And he said another way to achieve the same feeling is to decrease mouse sense gradually while firing. Blah blah blah. He just kind of says again, it feels bizarre that the feeling of fighting recoil feels utterly bizarre because there isn't that feeling of fighting recoil when pulling down the mouse. It feels like there's a big disconnect. One way to address that is to lower mouse sense in the downward vertical direction. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a flat value. I'm not sure, but anyways, I just thought that was interesting because that's not something. Like when he said that, I was like, really? Because I've never noticed that, and it sounds kind of gross, when I'm thinking about it. Like I don't know if I like that, but maybe the fact that I haven't noticed it maybe says something to it. I don't know. It's just an interesting one.
I think we have to be very careful about the specifics about what he's saying. If he's talking in particular about the mouse sensitivity in the downward vertical direction only, and he has the ability to control just that, because isn't that what he said?
That is what he said, but maybe. I assume it would be the vertical axis, but it could be only one.
I guess it could be the vertical axis. That's also okay, I think. Because you're already... I'm trying to come to a conclusion off the top of my head without really thinking about it too deeply, but I feel like if you're already trying to control vertical recoil, you might not notice because a decrease in sensitivity just feels like part and parcel of the recoil system.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, right?
That you're already controlling, and regardless of what happens, whether that's there or not, you'd get it into your muscle memory either which way to get used to it, or
as long as
recognize that or not.
Consistent, it's like a fixed
as long as it's
value.
consistent, then it doesn't really matter too much. And if it's just vertical as well, if you need to switch to another target, you wouldn't notice because it's not like you're suddenly switching over. Now, the one thing that I would say is that it still sounds bad to me. I feel like you should be able to deal with all of that stuff with the actual vertical recoil itself and just keep your mouse sense normal, because what happens if you want to flick for a target from down here to up there? Like, you don't want to change the vertical sensitivity then. And I feel like you're adding in these kind of other things that might cause problems, whereas I would hope, maybe I'm wrong, I've not fiddled around with this for years myself, but I would hope that you could keep all of that stuff within the vertical recoil system to do that simulation. Like, increasing the vertical recoil as the fire goes on, which is something that he's doing, kind of does the same thing as decreasing mouse sensitivity. You need to move your mouse more to get it back to normal. I suppose, yeah, I suppose it does something slightly different, that you could keep the vertical recoil looking the same, but require a larger mouse movement to get it under control. It's two sides of the same coin, but I think that mouse sensitivity thing, you have to be kind of careful. As I said, if you're going to flick to a target that's high, you're in construction in the skeleton bit, and you have to shoot somebody down there, and then someone's up on the top. That could mess with someone's muscle memory and make it feel weird. I don't know. Yeah.
There's issues of like what's called spray transfer, where you're just full autoing, and then another guy comes around the corner, and while still shooting, you just drag over to him. And that's sort of like, if it's like too much of a extreme difference, then you could be like, why, when I'm shooting and like controlling and full autoing and tracking and whatever, and then I go to move on a new target, but it's different because I'm not shooting anymore. Like I feel like there might be something there. I'm like very sensitive to mouse sensitivity. So there's like an initial kind of like resistance for me, but I thought it was interesting nonetheless. Okay, so final few things for me was I was like, hey, here's a video from our friend of mine, react to it. show me the React YouTuber in you. So he says, in regards to your video, I think he gets it mostly right. The recoil curve he recommends is more or less effectively how recoil curve in Realism mod is. But without some sort of restrictions to downward mouse movement, though, sensitivity reduction, I think the recoil would still feel floaty and weird. The only solution would be scraping or manipulating the auto compensation and have a curve like this, which he just sort of has like a, for the video watchers, it's just like a pretty much very similar to the curve you had, where it's just like, it's like slightly increasing and then it like curves rapidly up, exponentially grows.
Flattens or doesn't. His is exponential, right? His doesn't stop, I don't think.
Yeah, I would think in theory if you kept,
Yeah.
In regards to recoil pivot points, I haven't looked into it in depth. From what I remember, the recoil pivot point changes depend on the scope used, which is why some scopes seem to have bizarre effects on recoil visually. Scopes and FOV are a massive mess up in this game, as everyone knows. Just a side note analysis, there is recoil camera in the rework demo. The reason it may seem less is that it looks like the eyeball zoom when ADSing was massively reduced. So I guess like that effect where you ADS and you sort of like zoom in a bit. Looks like they reduced that down. Which is why the Voodoo site has so much vignetting, why it looks so small. FOV is another rabbit hole to go down, but I doubt the BS shooter community gives a shit about that at this stage. And he says he has a mod that adds variable zoom. Quickly on this section about weapon balance, the only way to fix it is to change how recoil and ergo stats are calculated. It would be fairly simple change, actually, and it would bring the stat difference between meta and stock, low slot count and high slot count down dramatically, which is like a very, very point I was thinking about earlier, is because of the additive system, the guns that you can just put more stuff on just like are subjectively better. It's, I mean, you mentioned it about the bulb ups and the non-bulb ups. So he mentions he can expand upon that. I don't know if you watched the whole thing. I just like said, yeah, hey, here's a timestamp for this section. And anyways, the issue is that I'm not certain BSG knows how to implement it. So I'm going to say this is how it should be, but a big product community has explaining how to achieve it. An example is Reddit demanding recoil auto compensation be lowered, and all that did was increase the amount of recoil overall and made first fire even less viable. This is mostly BSG's fault for being so opaque about the game systems. At the same time, I wish more okay, that's kind of kind of it. So yeah, and I had a question for you, because I didn't understand one section in regards to the cone graphic part. I'm gonna pull it up so I can directly reference it. Yeah, so around the 6-minute mark, right? I'm gonna watch it one more time. Yeah, so I don't know if it's the visual part I didn't understand, but I think what you're saying is that, and I think you might talk about this last week, is that you want it to where as it climbs up, the horizontal gets worse and worse. Essentially,
To a point, yeah, a little bit, yeah. It's basically just like how far you up through this, like the heat bar thing I was talking about before.
Yeah,
Like
that was the big one I didn't really get.
however far you are up that kind of dictates where you are on the cone, right? So if you're just like shooting once, you're in the bottom section. It's like it's a cone with the end cut off. So you're in that semi-auto thing. If you
Okay,
burst,
I
they'll
think I
all go
understand.
somewhere in that circle. If you semi-auto bang, it'll move to somewhere in that circle. You recenter it to the center, and it'll just each time. But as you fire more and more, you kind of start building up this recoil heat, and you move up the
Gotcha.
cone, and then it can jump like further and further. And then when you full auto, you get to the point of auto compensation, which is the top of the cone. And there you're going to just sit in this high recoil threshold. You're not going to go any worse than that because auto comp still exists in my system. And it just bounces around inside that thing until you let go, and then you'll move back down the cone again as the bar drains. That's basically what I meant.
I
By
gotcha.
that.
Okay. Yeah. No, I that makes sense.
Yeah, and the point was like you don't necessarily need to make the top of the cone like crazy. It doesn't need to be super wide. It doesn't need to be like, oh, it's pinpoint accuracy, and then like full auto is just like impossible to control. I don't think that's what we want. I just think you need to have full auto needs some disadvantage over like shorter bursts. I think if you want the system to be consistent, and it doesn't need to be a lot. It only needs to be about a bit really, but you need to get some advantage out of the shorter bursts rather than just the full auto, just to make it more balanced. Right? There's no. It kind of comes back to what people were saying is like, does it really matter? I mean, not really. You could make it flat if you wanted to. You just incentivize people to use full auto a bit more. I just think it's more interesting when there's more modes to think about, but they feel kind of seamless and organic to use. It's like, oh, I use semi here, or I might use short bursts because this guy's a bit closer. I can't control for the new spread thing, but he's close enough that he's within the cone. So I'll probably hit him, but I don't know exactly where. And then, oh, this guy's like super close, so I want to fight the vertical recoil, and I just want as many bullets as possible, right? There's like those three regimes. And to make those things feel by caliber and by distance and by skill and by judgment, those things to feel seamless between them. That's kind of what I was going for, really. But you can tailor it however you want, or however BSG want to do it to make it feel the way they want it to feel.
No, yeah, that makes sense. I like that analogy a lot, like the heat bar. You're sort of like trying to managing the recoil heat aspect, and I like that philosophical approach on it because like like Battlebig, for example, it's a very like I think it's a lot more heavy on skill than it is anything else because again it basically has technically three, but two recoils. There's like first shot, there's three. First shot recoil, which goes away after the first shot, and then there's vertical recoil and horizontal. Horizontal is just random left and right. You can't do anything about it. Vertical is obviously upwards, and you can do something about that. Pull the mouse down, and it just continually goes up. So, I can take I can take a FAMAS, right? High rate of fire, lots of vertical, but as long as I can get just the right amount of like skill, I can pull down at the right rates at the same firing rate. I can like beam people from like 100 meters full auto, and that's great for that. However, for Tarkov, I think it'd be more interesting to lean more into like this whole tactical gamer-esque side. It's a lot more as you're describing in that situation where it's like he's at this distance. I need to like manage the recoil heat of my gun to get the most effective accuracy, but also like volume and what's attachments do I have that's like enabling this. still kind of like it's like action. It's like there's skill component to it, but like I want that sort of RPG side to it. Maybe that's incorporative. Like I was thinking too, one thing they could do with whatever system they do, but let's assume it's some type of like system that's curved or like it grows over time, right? The recoil does, the vertical, horizontal, all of it. For the skills, the soft skills, they could. I think you instead of reducing horizontal, left and right, you have it only reduce vertical, because again, vertical is like something we can control. So like the players that are already good at controlling vertical, they're gonna like play the game, like they're gonna be better players, or probably play the game more. That's why they're better players. But they're also, because of they're gonna level up their skills, they're gonna lower their vertical. But it's not really a big deal because they're already good at doing that. You know what I mean? Whereas like if they're reducing their randomness, their left and right, that's kind of a big deal, right?
Yeah.
So I think that could be one way they could approach the skills, but yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, that's precisely the thing that we talked about previously with the mutant versus the RD. Back before they made the horizontal recoil changes, it was like the mutant is got a way lower vertical recoil, but the RD has low horizontal. So you pick the RD if you're a high skill player because you can deal with the vertical. It's something you can do. It's interesting. I mean, there's one thing that I just didn't touch on in the video at all, which is that I would love it if they had things like PMC auto control, horizontal recoil, stuff like that, like and like vertical and horizontal recoil themselves be split out on the different attachments. I'd really like that. I don't think it's the way the system works, to be honest. Not really. They could do that. To be fair, it's just they use the hidden horizontal, which is the one that actually does the job. But if they did something like that, that'd be awesome. But like, I didn't even want to go there because that's like a whole nother layer. Yeah, it's like so much more stuff. I was like, let's just leave it like this for now. I just don't think that they're ever going to get to that point of doing it. I think the system is complicated enough for them to not add this extra complexity into it. I'm like, is it really necessary? Like, the different guns feel different on their own, and then you use the modding system. I don't know. Like, maybe you're trying to bite off too much. So I didn't put it in there, but I would like to see that. Like, you see that in BattleBit, and it's cool. Run speed differences when you've got suppress whatever changes to reload depending on what you've got installed on mods. Stuff like that. It's like, it would be kind of cool. I would like that.
I would say at a bare minimum, maybe they should consider splitting horizontal and vertical. And that might be very dangerous because you might just see people prefer only horizontal. So I don't know. I might be regretting eating that, but
yeah,
it's a thought.
But I would like them to change it. So
maybe actually,
split out, really.
Maybe instead you do vertical and convergence. So do you want the gun to be? Actually, this is interesting. So do you want the gun to be less unwieldy the longer you full auto, and or more snappy while you're singling fire? Or do you want how big's your mouse pad? I don't know.
There's ways you can have these things as trade-offs for sure.
Yeah.
The like real horizontal recoil versus snappiness of the actual weapon. There's things that could be cool there. You would only need those things really, like ergo, vertical, horizontal, convergence, and dispersion. Really, those 5 things could be separated out, and it'd be cool. And it may allow people to make unique stuff, and it would change gun to gun too.
Yeah, I would really like to see the we have a lot of content in the game. I would like to see more of it be doesn't not everything has to be meta, but I like to see more of it be more viable. That's
you don't just want QDC SE5 advanced tube MOE plus buttstock on every single gun with a growl.
Honestly, my biggest gripe with BattleBit at the moment is like, sure, there's some guns that are like, just better than others. Like the Vector versus the FAMAS, the Vector pretty much wins out 90% of the time. But what I'm more annoyed about is the mods. Like, just some of them are like worse. Like it's like just a straight up downgrade than a different mod. There's no pros and cons to it. It's only cons. So that's my biggest gripe. And I'd like to see that stuff change a bit more. All right. I think one final thing about the recoil, I'm sorry, is I was surprised to see you include modding into the talk, but I'm very glad you did, because I think that's really cool, and I hope if anything BSG sees that and goes, huh, maybe we should think about that, because I would
You mean the
love
multiplicative versus additive
multiplicative,
thing?
dude. I really think that is a big important thing,
Mm.
um, because even even though the first mod does the most, has the most effect, that doesn't really matter, because the base gun is naked. You know what I mean? As soon as, you have to have a barrel in there, so
Yeah.
it's already, you know what I mean? You're already getting the missed returns to begin with. I think it's a good idea. I think it's just
Yeah.
great for casual players, just all around, just closing those gaps, right? Not making them so extreme. And
It just makes it so much easier to balance as well,
I think
because
so as well. Yeah.
you extend the range of mods
Hmm.
basically to infinity, right? You can have like as
Yeah.
many mods as you like, so long as you don't put any recoil reduction over 100% on any particular attachment. Technically, no one can ever get to 0
Yeah.
using that new system. And you do have to, and this is the point that I want to make. You do have to bump up all of the effectiveness of all of
You do.
the recoils on all of these, on all the attachments. But I actually also don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because it gives you more variety to play with. Like, think of the
Yes.
foregrips that we've got now, right? It's just like 4 is the best.
Hmm.
Whereas now it could be 0 to 8. And you've
Yeah.
got like much more granularity to choose with. Yeah, you could go halves, like, and they do that on some attachments with Ergo, but it's just a bit annoying, right? It's like it's cleaner to have it all be integer numbers. And yeah, it just, I think it'd be good. And then it means that because everything's higher, then it means that the guys who only have 1 or 2 mods or 3 mods, it actually means something, rather than you going from 100 recoil AK to 92 recoil AK,
Right.
and you're like,
Yeah.
it feels the same, like it doesn't
Right.
matter. But if you stack them all, then you go from an 80 or 72 recoil M4 to a 19 recoil M4, or something stupid happens, like they bring out a new suppressor, and then it doesn't work with the jailbreak thing, and you end up with a recoil of like 9, or you can double stack the stock, and you end up with a recoil of -20.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. That doesn't happen in the multiplicative system. It just doesn't happen. And as I said in the vid, right, the bullpup question, the bullpup problem
Buff.
goes away,
Yeah.
because that's super weird right now, and that's all fixed. It's all fixed with multiplication. It's not that complicated, really. It's really quite simple. So yeah, I think it's good. I think we're good.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree, and I think that it definitely makes balancing much easier on the mods. They just have to get the base right. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. Which that should be the easier part. You know what I mean? So I think it's easier on them in the long run. Like there's an initial fair amount of work to do, but in the long run, I think it's like way more beneficial.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
easier on them, because tweaking the mods isn't going to have a drastic effect. The bases are the most important thing.
Exactly. Like it's just not as sensitive. It's just such a nice thing, because people have talked forever about decreasing the gap between meta and stock.
Hmm.
And about how, like, and I even pointed out in my system, it's just like, if you make the base weapon actually sensible, the meta weapon goes like -25 or something. So like, it's just not possible to do what they need to do, or what people would like them to do to close that gap, really. And then this also fixes other things and makes everything more consistent too. So it just feels like it's just that perfect thing where it just checks off. It's like, oh, it's better for game balance, sure. It's better for consistency on modding, check. It gives you a greater range of mods to work with, check. It's like all of this stuff that doesn't really seem to be much downside, because even if you wanted to leave it the way it is, you could just do that. You could just do that, right? You just
could.
change the base recoils, and you change the mods amounts such that happens, right? You decrease the amount of recoil that the mods give if you really wanted to do so. Like, it's just, yeah, you get a bigger range of things you can control. It's just easier to do.
There is
So
one minor argument of playing devil's advocate, is that people are just gonna run naked AKs. Everyone's gonna be rats, bro. That'll just be the new meta. Which perhaps, but no. I don't know. I don't know.
I don't think they would. I think people would still see the value in going from a 55 recoil M4 to a 26 recoil M4. Like, yeah, it decreases the
so.
effectiveness of modding in some ways, but people will still do it.
Yeah.
They'll definitely still do it. And M4 actually isn't that high. Like, it only used to be. They decreased it recently. I mean, it's only 72, is it? I think base. And we're talking about going from 72 to 50 something. Like, it's not that bad. If you were looking at it from I'd have to do the maths on the AKM, for example, to figure out exactly what that ends up as. But I don't think it would be, dramatic. It probably goes from 130 to 100 or something as base. Again, it's probably still, even at that point, it's probably still overtuned, right, against the stock weapons, but it's better. Yeah, I was trying to think of like other situations that end up being a bit strange, but yeah, if there's anything weird, you can just increase the base recoil, so it's not a problem. Like if you have the RFB, it's got high base recoil, but you can't. But high base recoil for a gun that's stock is low base recoil compared to the lower receiver only. This is where the weird bullpup thing comes in, right? It's like the comparable weapons like the SR and then 1A, FAL, whatever, they have like really high recoils without any attachments. But when their stock configuration, it's relatively low. The RFB is about there anyway, a bit, it's a bit higher, but that's also its stock, like it's its lowest base recoil that all the mods work from. So you could end up in a situation where like it's a big buff to those kind of guns because you can now use real suppressors and take like tons of points off. So you'd have to see that. But if that was an issue, yeah, you just increase the base recoil.
I think as a general rule of thumb, when you could do you could have a system per gun basis, but maybe like 20 to 25% reduction is a good gap from like stock to fully kitted out the meta parts, that might be a decent gap. I mean, it's a lot better than 80%. It's like, that's a big gap, dude.
Yeah. Something like that. Or like even, I don't know, 26 recoil meta M4 versus like 50 something. I feel like that feels kind of okay. Like, it's a 72 recoil still feels pretty bad. Yeah, maybe 50% is probably all right. Like, what's a meta AKM?
Well, like
they actually can get quite low, but
the percentage kind of, it's relative to where you're starting at, right? If you're like starting at 200, then 80. I mean, that's a big, like it's you could slide around the scale, but I feel like if the percentage is too high, then like it just becomes too, the scale is just a little too big. I feel like.
Yeah. It's in particular things like the AKMS and that kind of one where they get really good if you have all the stuff, but they're like atrocious as stock. And like they should have more kick, that's fine, but they don't need to be just insane. You try and full auto that thing, it's just like absolutely unwieldy. But that's also a symptom of the existing recoil system. So, yeah, these things go hand in hand. That's why I mentioned it. But it's the first couple of shots are much more sensible. Like, yeah, they're going to bounce around, but it's not going to go right up into the sky immediately. I don't know. It's these things are all connected, so it's difficult to say if you did all of them. Like, oh, is now there's some new problems? Probably. It's just the way of things. I don't know.
Yeah, honestly, if the one thing I take away is multiplicative, that's a win for me. That's a W.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see.
All right. That's kind of it for me.
Yeah, I guess the only other thing, like just to finish off this baby, is I've been looking at the armor stuff as well. That was kind of like the next thing in my sights. Just that's not as radical, obviously, but just seeing what they showed us and chewing it over and mulling it through and just having a think about things. And I'm actually putting a video out tomorrow about my full thoughts and things. But it was interesting going through and seeing, like, scrutinizing the video, seeing exactly what's there, what they've called the stuff, like looking at the new hitboxes and things. After taking some time to like really think about it. And it's fascinating because you've got all of these new hitboxes now on the armor. So we have the Zabralo and the Thor, and you've got chest and back, left and right, stomach, neck, and the two shoulders. I think that's all of them. And then you've got the 4 plates, front, back, left, and right as well. And there's like a few questions that I have about this new system that is kind of intriguing. The first one being like, what hitboxes are still available that we don't see there? Do you know what I mean? A bit like lower nape now. Because I think did we talk about this a little bit last time about the potential armpit meta or something? Because because even on the Zabralo, if you turn one way, like if you turn your gun one direction, especially because there was it's in the video, like I flag it in the video that I'm bringing out. I think because the guy goes into the inventory or something, and there's like because his left arm comes up, there's like a gap here, and you could shoot the guy and one shot him in the thorax through the armpit, I think, depending on the way the hitboxes work. So I'm interested to know exactly how that functions. I had assumed previously that the armor coverage would still make sense based on purely the zones, but there were going to be more zones. But I actually don't think this is the case anymore. I think this is actually like realistic hitboxes, which is crazy because in the slick example, the slick only affects I mean, right now the slick only has a thorax coverage. Whether that'll be front plate, back plate, I'm not really sure. But it covers the thorax, right? But they managed to kill the dude in the demo with a single shot, and on the death screen that they showed, unless they made a mistake or something, but the death screen that they showed said thorax. So you can hit someone in the thorax from the front wearing a slick, right? And the slick's supposed to cover that hitbox. So the takeaway for me from that is that they've like disassociated these two things, right? There's no concept of the armor covers the whole hitbox anymore. It's just the armor covers what it covers. That's got its own collision model or whatever. And then the hitbox itself is behind that, depending on the actual physical size of the thing. Someone in the chat is saying, wasn't it neck? The neck one was for the trooper. I've watched this video like 50 times this morning. So the slick one hits the thorax, and the trooper one is from the neck with the shotgun. The guy's got the AK on the slick one. So one's neck and one is thorax. Which, because I also thought it was just neck, which makes sense, right? Because it doesn't cover that. But the guy with the slick dies to a thorax shot, which is kind of interesting. So there's a few things to this. It's fascinating. There's also the fact that front, back, and left and right. So I think left and right are only going to be small. I think like anywhere here, I don't think it's going to be covered. You're going to have plates to like, well, you can't really see it on the camera, but like up to halfway up your chest basically. And then after that, I don't think there is anything. And even on all the armors, like the armor just comes over the shoulder and over the arm, but not underneath. So you could be shot in that section. I don't think there's really any way that you can protect from that in most armors. But then you've got the flip side, right, of like the front section. So on the Zabralo and the Thor, they've got class 3. Or at least we don't know actually for the Zabralo, but the Thor that they showed has got class 3 on the front and the back and all over the other places. And then you put a plate in that's class 6. Well, what does that mean? Because they got rid of the whole like layered armor ages ago. The only way you could do this now is on helmets, and it's like impossible to test because as soon as it goes wrong, you die and you have to queue back in again, which is really annoying. And because it's just not really relevant in the game, no one has tested it for a long time. But now you're going to have, again, it's like because back in the day, they're just for people who have started more recently than about the last 2 or 3 years, there used to be a system all the way back in the day where the armored rigs you could put over actual armored vests. Like you used to be able to stack them together, and people used to do that. This is bringing that system back in again, but with plates instead. So you can have class 6 at the front and then class 3 behind. I don't know what that does. Like I have no idea what the actual model is for that. Interestingly, it's going to be fascinating to see exactly how that makes things work, because it might actually buff armor more, like the big armors with big plates in and stuff, because you've got the 6 and then the 3 afterwards. So I don't know. That's kind of cool. There's like the Western versus Eastern plates there. There's like the ESAPI plates for like the Western style ones, like the NFM Thor. I think that's actually Norwegian. They're like a Norwegian company or something, but they use like ESAPI plates, which go in. And there's like the 2 ones at the front, which are the 2x2s, and then there's the 2 side ones, which are 1x1. So they're different. So you can't just put the plate anywhere. And then there's the ones for the Zabralo. You only see it for a split second in the thing when they shoot him with the shotgun. Is that they're called like Granite 5A, which is some plate for the Zabralo, I suppose. And I was like looking around because there's a lot of conversation about what's modular, what's not modular, whether some will and won't be. Some will just be fixed or whatever. And like the rule of thumb is Russian armor is probably going to be fixed. US armor is going to be modular, you imagine. But I looked around and like quite a few of them actually have slots for stuff. I think there's various ones, even some of the like crappy like ceramic ones at the moment, like you can replace the plates and things. I was like intrigued. I like did a bit of digging around, and actually more of them are modular than I expected. Maybe they're not like super easy to get in and out, but it's possible. So I don't actually know like the full scale of what's going to be good or not. The last thing that I'll say about it is this whole neck protection thing. I think neck might be the new head eyes. Like neck is going to be crazy. And I had a quick look through, like none of the armored rigs really have it. Like the Osprey does. There's a couple, but almost none of the class 4 armored rigs do. interestingly, the crappy ceramic one actually does, and things like the Karasa do as well. So the Karasa's got this like neck protection. This might become really important.
That's what I'm feeling.
Yeah, it might become absolutely critical to have this neck piece on. Maybe there'll be an extra piece for it. Maybe it'll be separate for some armors as well. I don't really know. We're gonna have to see. But you have to try to like glean as much information as possible. Like my consolidated thoughts are there in tomorrow's vid. But it's been interesting. Like I don't know that much about modular armor and plating particularly, so I did some research and had a little look around. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, I wonder what the material the neck piece is made out of. I mean, my like very low educated guess would be like aramid. I don't even know if you could call an educated guess at this point, but if it's aramid, let's say, I feel like that's like good enough to simply be like an anti-scav / anti-shotgun, because that's like this when he shot the guy in the Thor Zabralo with like the helmet on and the neck, and one time I was like, oh no. So like, yeah, definitely I feel like neck armor's gonna be pretty important. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be interesting, and those armors, and we're going to have to see what the full, because like you can put the armors in the modding thing now. The Gazelle has a neck piece. So does the Corund, intriguingly. Yes. So we're going to have to see what this does, and if it's the way that I suspect, where it is actually just like, because I thought they were going to do it lazily, but if it is actually just the actual hitbox is only covered by the actual armor in the way it covers it, you might have a hitbox half covered. So something like the Reduced M, I think actually doesn't cover that much neck, really. So you might cover a little bit, but not much. So you might actually be better off with a Gazelle. But it's fascinating. It's going to mix. It's going to take it completely on its head, and then there's like, are you going to buy the slick on its own? Is it going to have like class 2 aramid in it, and then you put a plate in? Like, what's that going to cost? Where'd you get the plates from? Like, how much are they going to be? Can you buy plates for class 4 to 6? It's good. It's fascinating. Like you can imagine a situation where people have class 6 at the front, 4 at the back and sides. That sort of thing. It's like a min max. Really is going to depend on what happens. I'm so intrigued. I want to see like which ones you can modularize, which ones you can't, which are fixed, which are not, which hitboxes that they look like they cover, like how you can be able to tell, like all the testing. It's going to be interesting and cool.
Yeah, like the Sigilla rig too is like literally like a floating plate. I think there's a back plate too, and it's like chains holding it together. Like it's very there's like very minimal armor coverage there. So I feel like stuff like that's going to get heavily devalued, and the new end screen is going to be like, instead of head eyes, going to be like throat neck or something.
Exactly. People are going to get very frustrated. But, yeah, I don't know. We're going to see. I'm excited about it. I'm not excited to be getting super performance slugged through the side of my class 6 armor, really. But we're going to have to figure it out. Like, I think that's the thing. Armors that have, because like the slick and basically like flips everything on its head, right? Armors like the slick and the trooper, things with really low debuffs, really low move speed penalties, and all this kind of thing. Because they had full coverage before, it didn't matter. Now it's going to be a real consideration to go for something that has class 3 all over the place, and then you put some plates in. But you just, as you said, right, you need that like scab protection, something like, because class 3 is good enough to protect you against like all the garbage. You know what I mean? It's like the low grade 9x19 and 9x18. It's all the shotgun buckshots, except for maybe flechette. It stops almost all of the slugs as well, like all the crappy scav slugs anyway. So, and that's what you need, right? Like you're just getting like copper saboed to the side. Just God's sake, just one tap you, like no problem. These things do so much damage. It's gonna be crazy. Even buckshot, you're gonna get touched by 2 pellets and die. Like it's nuts. So yeah, we're gonna have to see. And you might not be able to protect your armpits. It's just gonna be like everyone's like T-Rexing around the map. You can like bring your arms in.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting when people prioritize, because I could see like people not wanting to put in like back plates to like have the extra movement, or not the weight penalties. But obviously if they get shot in the back, they're gonna be screwed. So it's kind of I'm interested to see the emergent player behavior.
So am I. It's gonna be so cool to see. Like you just have the basic, like it's got aramid 2 at the back, and then you put in 4 plates at the sides, and then you've got like the 6 at the front kind of thing. It's going to be fascinating to see what people end up going for with the balance of cost and stuff.
Yeah, do you forgo front plates? Do you just only do side plates? I can't imagine, but maybe. And I like it too, because it's like now it's like when you're taking a fair fight, hypothetically, you're both facing each other, so you both got your armor protecting you. But like if you're getting the drop on the guy, you kind of get like a bonus, because
exactly.
yeah,
it's like World of Tanks.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I never
Makes
played that
flanking
game, but
even more powerful. But
yeah.
yeah, it's the classic thing. Like front armor's more powerful than
Oh,
you
okay.
want to
Yeah,
hit them in the
yeah.
back if you can. It's like the classic tank trope.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be fascinating. Yeah, there's one other thing, which is that this system fixes the overall durability problem. You can now take armor, you can get shot in the arm, and the armor breaks, and your chest is still fine. This
I
fixes
like
all of
that.
this.
That's
Like
a huge thing.
it's going to swing everything, right? You're going to be like, oh, I want to take in this kind of like, at least light armor, so I don't just get like shotgunned constantly. You're not going to be able to protect your forearm still, I don't think, because it's shoulder,
Right.
left, right. It's like probably comes halfway down the bicep, I would imagine. But it's better than nothing, and it makes it more normal now. It's not like this weird gaming mechanic. Like it actually makes sense now, which is like, I can't wait for that. It's going to be good.
I wonder too if the hitboxes of like the neck armor and neck and stuff like that, if you're above them, like in factory on top of the rafters, and you're like shooting directly down at them, can you like go in between the helmet and the neck armor gap to hit their like collarbone?
Dude, like maybe if it's the way that it looks, you might be able to. Like someone in chat has just said, how far down do some of the face shields go? Like the big MT one might even kind of cover part of your neck or something. Because like right now that doesn't actually do it, right?
Right.
Like ears don't get covered even though it covers them. Because if you shoot ears, the face shield doesn't cover the ears hitbox. Right at the moment. And so even if you shoot through the face shield and hit the ears hitbox, because the face shield doesn't cover the ears hitbox, you still die right now in the game. This may change that as well, which is like, interesting. There's so much stuff to this. I think it's going to be cool. I'm excited for that. But again, another December update.
Just have to patiently wait.
Exactly.
All right. I think that wraps it up for today's episode. Thanks everyone for tuning in as always. Appreciate you all. And with that, catch you all next week.
Catch you later.